how do we analyze what we used to take for given in the, kind of the back end of the Coastal, which was volatile at best, when we had 6 in 6 years or 7 in 6 years or whatever it was. Or remember the Atlantic, part of the Atlantic used to be just the sacrificial lambs to Clemson and whoever else. So what does that look like now that we've taken down the division walls? So really the two things for me are who's third and who emerges. And I've got some different thoughts about not just third, but really who's going to emerge. And I think, Joe, when you get into it, you've got to look at the conference schedule somebody is playing and what that winning percentage is.
Okay.
I think Duke is playing uphill. I think Wake Forest is playing uphill because they're playing a tougher conference schedule. Louisville is not. And Louisville's got a guy who is coaching them who, quite frankly, is capable of a flip switch in 23 in Jeff Brom. They've got enough offensive talent. I think they've got enough defensive wherewithal that they can kind of put that together. So I think those are the real two issues you got to find out. Who's the team that's going to emerge out of that stack, and then who's third? Because we know it's going to be Clemson, Florida State. Florida State's going to get some first-place votes, but it's going to be Clemson 1, Florida State 2. Who is third? I think that's a terrific question in Charlotte, and I'm not sure how much we'll get to the answer of it, but we're all going to have to fill out a ballot and submit somebody.
Yeah, you're right about the idea that we have to completely rethink our expectations without the divisions, and that sets up how we even do kickoff. Where it's you mentioned 3 days. Well, it's 3 days now because they can spread these coaches out. We don't have an Atlantic day, we don't have a Coastal day, and honestly, when you talk about who's going to be third and who has actually the most advantageous schedule and has a decent quarterback, the expectations are right back on Mac Brown in North Carolina, are they not?
Yep, they are, and the question for Mac Brown in North Carolina immediately goes to defense, but I also want to engage people on the offensive side of the ball just a touch here.
Okay. Let's say it's funny you mentioned that because as I was making notes yesterday, I wrote down what do we know? What don't we know? Right. In terms of the ACC and where things are going. And I jotted down for Carolina, we know Drake Maye, we know what he's capable of, and we know, but what we don't know is how Chip Lindsey, the new offensive coordinator, is going to take the concepts that work for Phil Longo and the old offensive coordinator and implement more of a commitment to a run. That's what they say. That's what they say they want to do. But we hear coaches in talking season all the time say what they want to do. And my fear is that it's going to be the Drake Maye show again, having to bail them out from a defense that has been really, really bad under Mac Brown consistently. I get the idea that there's nowhere to go but up from last season where they were dead last in the ACC in a lot of categories.
Right.
There's nowhere to go but up. But, I mean, even if you're marginally better, you're still finding yourself in the same situation where a catastrophic run play or a broken down pass play, especially with the secondary that's in flux, is going to put Drake Maye back in a position where they're going to have to win 65-61.
Maybe. It's in the cards, right? I mean, it's possible. But look at the leadership and look at the experience that Carolina brings back for the second year of Gene Chizik's administration under Mac Brown. So you can buy in that Carolina will be better in some respect, okay? There are enough playmakers back at all three levels of the defense, I would think, to be improved.
Yeah.
How much improved against the schedule, Joe, becomes the question. South Carolina, Appalachian State, and Minnesota. I mean, those are three real football teams to start the season. Now, May is a show, but here's the point I'm asking you about where they are offensively. Do we know for sure how good the wide receivers are going to be? I think we do, but we know some players, but we don't know. I mean, Tez Walker, we suspect will be very good, right? Terrific transfer. It's amazing. Kent State has flooded college football with wide receivers this year. It's just what happens in the portal. But JJ Jones comes back. They've got two tight ends that are proven playmakers. And I'll go back to what you said a moment ago about the run game with Chip Lindsey's emphasis on the run game. Now, I know Chip, full disclosure, used to be the head coach at Laster High School in Cobb County, Georgia, then got his coaching career going. Worked for Gus Malzahn at UCF. I think he's a terrific, terrific play caller and designer, and I can see why he and Mac Brown have locked up here together on this mission. I think he will showcase Drake Maye because Chip Lindsey's a smart guy. Okay, that's number one. Number two, though, you got to get whatever Chip Lindsey's thoughts are to whatever Drake Maye's knowledge is and get that on the same page. I'm going to assume a lot of that was accomplished in the spring because of Maye's acumen and experience and poise and what Lindsey's learning curve is with Maye. So I think Carolina then comes back to what you said a moment ago, and I think this is a point to investigate in Charlotte, at least dig into a little. How are they going to run the ball, and how many guys are they willing to invest to run the ball with? Because, see, that's the other thing. Carolina's not a one-back team. No, Carolina's got 3 guys. They might have 4. Yep. Who knows? We may come to August and say they got 5 guys. I think the ability to run the ball allows Maye to actually be a better quarterback than he was last year.
Sure.
Maybe the numbers won't be as good, but I can tell you in dabbling on the Sunday side and the Saturday side, there are some people at the next level that think he and Caleb Williams are 1, 2 in some order, but they want to see how Maye's leadership works when they have a consistent run game and he doesn't have to bail them out by making these incredible throws.
The reason why, the biggest reason why, despite all of the question marks around North Carolina, and again, mine continue to go back to the defense. It will always be about the defense. The entire tenure of Mac Brown 2.0 has been about, hey, I trust your quarterback. I don't know. You can have a dynamic offense. I just don't know if you can make stops.
Right.
And Gene Chizik 1.0, when he was here in North Carolina under Larry Fedora, I thought did a decent enough job with the bend, don't break. We didn't really see that last year.
Yeah.
And it then comes into the question of, all right, well, is it a talent issue or a scheme issue? Well, we know what Gene Chizik wants to do. We've seen it somewhat work at UNC before. So that gets back to a misevaluation of talent. And look, there were some changes. They made the change to bring in Gene Chizik a year ago. Now we've got the Dre Bly changes from this offseason as well. And there were some player attrition because of that. So there's some question marks there. So to me, it always comes back down to, can you stop people, which was an issue for them last year. But the schedule, and this is why I say Carolina is probably best positioned to really talk about that third spot behind Clemson and Florida State in the ACC rankings. Their schedule is so favorable. Yes, you start in a
whoa, hold on.
What?
Favorable early.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. So I'm on the football schedules here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the schedule ahead of us. So it's South Carolina neutral, but then you're home against App State, Minnesota at home. You play road games, real road games, 4 times at Pitt, at Georgia Tech, at Clemson, at NC State. Just 4 true away games. Right. So you have a lot of favorable matchups against teams that you've historically had success with, like Miami and whatnot, and Duke too, which you, again, last minute this situation. What was the stat that I had seen where, again, this gets back to the defense. Winnable games, all of them, but they're also all losable. The margin for error last year was razor thin. 7 games decided by 4 points or fewer. The record was 4-3. Including that stretch down the at the end where they ended up losing those games, as opposed to what happened earlier in the year. I think when they started out 9-1, they had won those games by 3 points or fewer. Down the stretch, it was losing those games. So that's kind of the margin for error for Carolina, but the schedule is conducive to a good season, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think they're very capable of being the third team behind Florida State and Clemson.
Yeah,
but they don't have a lot of time for adjustment, because I look at those first 3. They've got to start strong, then they've got to finish strong. I mean, you and I both know Clemson, NC State at the end is just, I mean, those could be warhead games, Joe.
Yeah,
you know that.
Yeah. There's a reason why Mac Brown was complaining about it this past season when the schedule came out.
Well, and he saw it before everybody else did and knew it was coming, and kind of beat us to the press, if you will.
But here's the thing, and I said it then. I said it when he foreshadowed what the schedule was going to be, and then talked about it when the schedule was out. You can't try to elevate Carolina and want to find yourself in positions to play big time football. This is an issue that I usually have with the ACC. This is not a Mac Brown issue specifically. This is an issue I have with ACC coaches sometimes, where you talk the talk about elevating the programs, but when you face some adversity in the scheduling, suddenly you're like, well, this isn't fair. Do you think anybody in the SEC cares about fairness when they're talking about their schedule? The good teams, the programs that are actually trying to play for something, will manipulate their schedule by padding a game or 2 before a big one. I mean, there's a reason why Campbell's on North Carolina's schedule later in the season. But I really have little time for coaches that talk about wanting to play for championships and then whining about where their schedule has the more difficult games. You should be playing your best football at that time of the year. You should be that'll be a better measure of where you're at the end of the season than at the beginning of the season.